They said the ballroom at the Drake could hold 1,000 secrets, but the moment Ethan Vale's hand shot forward and his pregnant wife staggered backward into a chrome chair, the room held only one. Champagne paused mid-air, conversations sheared off mid-sentence. A violinist choked on a high note. Flashbulbs caught Maya's flinch as she clutched her belly, caught Sloane Hart's immaculate smile freezing at the corners, caught a millionaire becoming a headline in real time. In the sliver of silence between gasps and apologies, Ethan glanced to Sloane like a schoolboy checking for approval and found only absence. She had already turned away, lips pressed white, eyes calculating exits. The maitre d' began moving toward them. A medic lifted her bag. A donor whispered, "Optics." Someone laughed, a small, shocked bark, and yet the loudest sound was the click of 1,000 private judgments locking into place. The night kept falling, and Ethan was already standing outside of it, face pressed to a window, watching himself disappear. The gala had the sheen of a well-pressed lie. Uplighting washed the walls in pale gold, and the placards displayed names the city had taught itself to pronounce with reverence. Ethan's was one of them, Ethan Vale, Venture Partners. The Drake's grand ballroom smelled faintly of cut roses and a winter storm held at bay by good money. A sponsor reel glowed on a screen above the bar. The soundtrack promised transformation for those who could afford it. Maya ran her fingers across the scalloped edge of a place card, feeling the paper's tooth against her skin. 30 weeks along, she had learned how to fold herself into spaces that were not built for her. Banquettes, town cars, the narrow gaze of people who measured tenderness by its price tag. She had chosen a dress forgiving of her changing center of gravity and a pair of flats buried under yards of silk. She was tired. She was grateful to be out. She was rehearsing how to leave him. The decision had been stacking in quiet piles for months. Screenshots of texts, receipts for solo lunches, a lockbox key hidden in a pocket of her camera bag. Ethan found her near the silent auction, where a lot titled Midwest Cloudscape had already been bid up to a number that would have cleared a student's debt. He slid a hand to her elbow, too gently to be natural. "You look luminous," he said. He always praised her in words that sounded like lighting cues. She smiled because she had practiced that too. "The baby appreciates the flattery." She tapped the rim of her sparkling water and followed him with measured steps. "Investors are here. Leonard wants to see us together." His jaw flexed the way it did when he was about to enter a room he'd already imagined winning. "Us," she echoed, and followed him as a waiter with the eyes of a night nurse wove between guests holding high-arched glasses. A photographer took candids for the foundation. Maya watched the woman's hands, quick, kind, professional, then felt the familiar ache of missing the work that made her whole. She had not told Ethan that a small gallery in Logan Square had accepted her series, pending final selections. She had learned not to bring him news that did not concern valuation. Sloane Hart arrived the way adverse weather does. Thin air, static, a hairline crack in attention before the sound. In PR decks they called her a fixer. In certain circles she was the kind of risk everyone pretended they weren't taking. She had worked with Ethan on a philanthropic initiative in the spring and stayed long after the photography wrap. Tonight she wore a sliver of black silk that turned every gaze she intercepted into an admission. Her smile was a scalpel, her handshake was a contract. "Ethan," she said, her voice pitched to land smoothly in his chest. "Your speech, save it for later. Leonard's table is not ready. Walk with me." She didn't wait for agreement, only compliance. Maya watched his smile loosen around the edges. She had catalogued these micro-shifts for months, the way he unfocused his eyes when listening to Sloane, the way he tucked his chin when he lied without intending to. He hadn't told Maya about the penthouse suite Sloane used for client dinners. He hadn't told her about the deal points that were more flirtation than finance. He had told her he was tired. That part had been true. Near the dais, a woman from the foundation hugged Maya with equal parts sincerity and calculation. 30 weeks, the woman said. I had twins and still made it to a gala at 32. You look incredible." "Thank you," Maya said, thinking of the photograph she had taken that morning. Sunlight falling across the uneven paint of their kitchen door, the tiny chips like a constellation. She had titled the series Thresholds and not told Ethan she had submitted it for a show. Her mother had once told her, "You cannot hang your art in a heart that locks from the outside." A small comedy played at the edge of the room. A donor trying to outbid himself anonymously, a violinist losing a hair from his bow and pretending not to notice, a server catching a champagne coupe with the reflexes of a goalkeeper. Life insisted, as it does, even when the plot was sharpening elsewhere. Sloane glanced back, the briefest brush of mascaraed lashes over Maya's belly, and then she was steering Ethan away as if he were a heavy dress she needed to keep off the floor. "We'll do the table walk," she murmured. "Smile on the left, nod on the right. Don't improvise." It happened near a cluster of chairs when a donor cut across Maya's path, and Ethan, torn between Sloane's hand and his wife's voice, made the wrong calculation at the wrong time. His palm met the soft of her forearm. The sudden backward step, the scrape of metal against marble, the gasp that became a sound everyone heard and no one could name. The photographer's camera flashed. The violinist's note cracked. The maitre d' hissed to the floor captain, "Medic!" "Ethan," Maya said, voice small and precise, "don't touch me." He mumbled something about stability, about needing to talk to Leonard, about optics, the word a ruin in his mouth. He looked to Sloane for a line reading and found her looking away, already calculating radius and fallout. Maya righted herself, a palm to her belly, breath in measured counts. Security edged closer, then receded when she lifted a hand. She allowed the event medic to ask questions. She listened to the violinist recover. She watched Sloane's reflection in a tall window and understood that other people's desires had begun to write her life. That was the last hour she would live in their apartment as a wife. The city was a row of lit beads along Lakeshore Drive by the time Maya stepped from the rideshare. Snow made a fine powder of the air. In the elevator, she leaned against the cool mirrored wall and let her anger crystallize into something less volatile: decision. Diego, their night doorman, opened the lobby door with a look that said, without saying it, "I heard." "Everything all right, Mrs. Vale?" She paused. "I'm going to drop the missus soon, Diego." He nodded once, solemn. "You want me to be around when he gets home?" Diego had a calm a person earns by watching lives come and go through revolving doors. Maya unlocked the apartment and stood in the dark long enough to let her eyes map the furniture by shape alone. This had been the stage for so much performance. The expensive couch no one sank into because it creased, the kitchen island where Ethan arranged catered meals to look home-cooked, the framed photographs she refused to hang because she wouldn't let her lens be decoration. Here was the plant that died because neither of them remembered to water it. Here was the coffee mug chipped on the inside where only the drinker could see the damage. She moved efficiently, the way you do when your body belongs to more than one person. She packed one suitcase, then another. She took only what she had bought, plus a few gifts that had felt like real offerings instead of apologies. A knit blanket from her aunt, a signed book from a professor who once told her that good art tells the truth at a speed the heart can bear. She set the spare keys on the counter and slid her wedding ring into a small porcelain bowl she had made in a pottery class the first year they dated. It made a sound like a coin dropped into a fountain where no wishes come true. When Ethan arrived, he brought the weather in with him, brushed with the cold and smelling faintly of scotch. He saw the suitcases and then her. "Maya," he started, hands up. "That was a misunderstanding. I never—" "You pushed me." No, I steadied you. Sloane asked me to." "Leonard, stop using people's names like they're amulets." Her voice surprised even her. Level, quiet, unshaken. "I called my brother. He's coming. Diego knows. The locks will change in the morning." "You can't be serious." He laughed, a brittle sound. Where would you go? She rolled one suitcase to the door. Somewhere without you. A knock. Arjun stepped in, his jaw a line, his eyes softer when they found Maya's. He'd driven down from Evanston in a sweatshirt layered under a peacoat, hands still smelling faintly of cinnamon from the chai he brewed to stay awake. "We're set," he said, "and your overnight bag is in the car." Ethan moved to block the doorway, instinct tightening his shoulders. Arjun inhaled and said in a tone that belonged to someone who had seen hospital corridors at 3 in the morning, "Move aside, Ethan. You will not put hands on my sister again. I'm her husband." "You're a guest," Maya said, "for the last time." Diego appeared behind Arjun, hands folded. "Mr. Vale," he said gently, "I'm going to accompany Miss Vale downstairs." He added, quieter, "Don't make me call anyone." The moment stretched. Ethan saw himself from above, a man lit by unflattering chandeliers, his reflection multiplied in the black winter glass. He stepped aside. Maya smelled his cologne, cedar, something coastal, and felt nothing. In the elevator, Arjun pressed the emergency stop gently for a breath, and they stood between floors, suspended. "Are you scared?" he asked. "I'm ready." She drew in a long breath. "And I will not raise a child inside someone else's PR strategy." They started again. In the lobby, Diego opened the door like it was a proscenium. The night breathed around them. Somewhere deep in the building, a security camera watched a man stand alone in his doorway. At 2 in the morning, a trending clip found its language. "Millionaire shoves expecting wife at fundraiser." At 2:30, Ethan's bored WhatsApp lit up like a seizure. He didn't sleep. He paced the apartment that now held too much air. He called Sloane. She ignored the first 3 calls, then answered the 4th. "You'll handle this," he said. It sounded like a plea dressed as confidence. Her silence came with the faint purr of a car. "You made a choice," she said. "Multiple choices, actually." "I need a statement. Context. You saw—" "I saw you," Sloane said, and then she hung up, leaving him with the noise of his own breath and the cold, soft thunder of a city ready to devour him. By dawn, the locks changed. By noon, the headline had 1,000,000 views. By evening, Ethan Vale was a man kicked out of his own narrative. Diego texted Maya a thumbs-up emoji and, separately, a list of movers he trusted. Arjun brewed more chai. Maya slept in fits, hand on her belly, the new apartment key pressing a small crescent into her palm. Before Ethan was a headline, he was a son. Victor Vale built a business in the 90s the old way, leveraged, loud, convinced that fear was a better motivator than hunger. He taught his boy that apologies were admissions and intimacy a liability. He shook hands like he had somewhere else to be. Ethan learned to make friends with distance. It wasn't cruelty so much as a climate. His mother had been kind and underslept, sick for long stretches with a condition that didn't have a hero's arc. Ethan learned to collect small comforts, the hum of a refrigerator at night, the way the housekeeper's radio murmured old boleros in the laundry room, the unexpected sweetness of canned peaches in winter. He taught himself to keep his voice calm when he wanted to scream, to say, "I'm fine," like a punctuation mark. He stayed small enough to pass undetected through rooms that vibrated with his father's mood. At 28, he met Maya at a pop-up gallery in Pilsen. He had wandered in to impress a client with his cultural curiosity and found himself standing too long in front of a photograph of a motel mirror. In the glass you could see the photographer's hand, a smudge of presence. Maya watched him watching and laughed softly when he started to apologize. "It's meant to make you uncomfortable," she said. "I like art that doesn't let you pretend you're invisible." He asked her out, not because of the photograph, but because of what it did to him, made him aware of the space he occupied. She went because his eyes were better than his swagger. They constructed something slow. He learned to sleep with another person's breathing in the room. She learned to tolerate the way he spoke about time as if it were a currency he printed. They ate cheap noodles and argued about whether compassion had to be costly to count. On Sundays, they walked through neighborhoods, picking imaginary houses and imaginary lives. Sloane arrived later, a professional complication that metastasized. They met at a round table called Philanthropy and Narrative, a phrase so glossy it squeaked. Sloane was sharp, unblushable, and frighteningly good at making other people's mistakes disappear. She didn't chase Ethan. She left the door unlocked. She kissed him the first time like it was a test of his will, and he failed and then pretended failing was strategy. What Ethan never told anyone. The affair wasn't about sex, not really. It was about power as oxygen. With Sloane, he could rehearse the version of himself that never had to be told no. Sloane understood that power was theatrical and that the audience was always present. Maya refused to be an audience. She asked him questions that unraveled him. She wanted his answers even when they were inconvenient. Sloane wanted his momentum even when it was cruel. When the board recruited him to helm a new fund, Leonard Price, the old lion, put a hand on Ethan's shoulder in a way that was both blessing and test. "You have vision," Leonard said. "Can you be trusted with it?" Ethan nodded, because saying "I don't know" was not an available answer. He meant to be good, but meaning had never been enough. The fund grew quickly, too quickly. Graham Knox handled operations and compliance with a smile that never showed his teeth. Ethan didn't notice, or pretended not to, the way Graham's spreadsheets sang a little too sweetly. On the morning after the gala, Ethan shaved carefully and watched a video of himself become the man he couldn't argue against. He wrote a statement 3 times, each draft more polished and less human. He sent them to Sloane. She replied to none. He texted Leonard, "We should talk." Leonard's response came hours later. "My office, 5 p.m., alone." The day stretched. The apartment felt like a museum of a life he had purchased and never unboxed. He found a print from Maya's early series in a drawer, a photo of a doorframe with chipped paint, light spilling in like a dare. He sat on the kitchen floor and rested his back against a cabinet, and for a moment, with his eyes closed, he could be a boy again listening to a refrigerator hum. He didn't see the other story rising beneath his. Sloane's landlord called her twice about an envelope left at her door. A man named Graham Knox, the firm's COO, forwarded Ethan a spreadsheet with a note, "We'll control the narrative." And in a coffee shop in Rogers Park, Maya opened her email to find a subject line that read, "I'm sorry, there's more." Sloane. Leonard Price's office had the assured warmth of a place that had known both victory and sorrow. Books lined the walls like a quiet jury. When Ethan entered, Leonard stood by the window, looking down at Michigan Avenue as if it were a river he'd crossed one too many times. "Sit," Leonard said. Ethan sat. "The video is bad," Leonard said without ceremony. "The optics are worse. I remember when optics were something photographers talked about instead of lawyers." "I panicked," Ethan said. "It was a moment." "Moments become men, Ethan. You know this." Leonard's eyes were not unkind. "We can craft a statement. Sincere, not sentimental. You can take a leave." "I can fix it," Ethan said, and even he heard the verb choice. Leonard tilted his head. "Fixing is what got you here. You need to change." He let the sentence sit between them until Ethan felt its edges. There it was, a small truth placed on the table like a threat. Ethan exhaled and, for a sliver of a second, let himself imagine a world in which he didn't run toward every problem with his hands open and grasping. Leonard reached for a folder. "Sloane sent over a draft," he said, sliding it across the desk. "It offers context. It's technical." Ethan scanned, heat gathering at his collar. The language was brutal in its vagueness, mischaracterized, regrettable, temporary disorientation. If he read it aloud, he wouldn't recognize himself. "No," he said. I won't use this. Good, Leonard said, relief ghosting his face. Then say what happened. Use nouns and verbs. Save the adjectives for later. What happened? Ethan repeated, testing the words like he might test a rope over a ravine. Meanwhile, across town, Maya sat at a coffee shop where the barista remembered her decaf order and pretended not to know her from the video. She opened Sloane's email with the caution of someone cracking a door she'd barricaded. Maya, the email began. What happened last night was unforgivable. I'm not asking for your sympathy. But I need to tell you something that may affect your decisions. Your husband is not the only person who has been reckless. Graham Knox has been using my proximity to Ethan to distract him while he pushes deals through compliance with numbers that will not stand daylight. He wanted Ethan to be the shield. He assumed you would play your part. I didn't stop it. I am sending you files. Do with them what you will. There were attachments, spreadsheets, emails with half-disguised language, a memo with the word expedite appearing like a prayer in the margins. Maya didn't understand all of it. She understood enough to feel her spine straighten. A PDF of board minutes where the phrase accelerated due diligence did not bother to blush. A donation ledger that braided philanthropy with pitch decks until neither could breathe alone. Her phone buzzed. Arjun's name glowed on the screen. You all right? He asked. I think I have a map of a maze, she said. Do you want me to? No, not yet. I need to finish something. At 5, Ethan told Leonard he would step down for now. He used the word accountability and felt it in his mouth like a foreign candy. Sweet, alarming. Leonard nodded. Good, he said. Now go write what you actually feel. Ethan left without a job title, but with a destination he didn't know how to reach. On the sidewalk, a young journalist with a microphone saw him and asked, Do you regret what you did? Yes, he said. The camera blinked. He kept walking. Sloane watched the clip on her phone in the back of a black car. Her driver chewed gum loudly. Do you need me to wait? He asked. No, she said. I need you to forget you saw me. She slid on sunglasses, though the sun had slipped behind buildings. She dialed a number that would eventually route to Graham Knox. We need to talk, she said into the voicemail, before your mess becomes mine. Across the river, Maya's obstetrician called to check after hearing about the gala. The baby was fine, but the doctor's voice held the careful cadence of someone delivering more than medical advice. Stress isn't a trophy, she said. Maya smiled despite herself. No, she said. It's a mirror. She shut her laptop and, for the first time in months, slept without dreaming she was late for something. Maya had always photographed spaces where people changed their minds. Waiting rooms with chairs arranged to fake intimacy, the cool corridor between a courtroom and the world, the glass vestibule of a women's shelter where a volunteer kept a dish of peppermint candies on the desk. I like the places that pretend to be neutral, she had told Ethan once, early. Nothing is neutral. Now her life was a series of thresholds. She moved from Arjun's spare room to a short-term sublet in Andersonville, a one-bedroom above a florist that smelled faintly green even in January. Nina, the neighbor, knocked on her door with a plate of almond cookies and a practiced boundary. I'm around, Nina said, but I won't ask questions you don't want to answer. Nina taught piano in the afternoons and believed in leaving people better than she found them. Maya returned to Dr. Lila Chen, whom she had seen before the pregnancy when the arguments with Ethan turned into knots. Lila's office had a window that faced a brick wall. No view, all presence. She let Maya speak without nudging the narrative toward pity. You were planning to leave before the gala, Lila said in their third session, gently placing a frame around something Maya hadn't framed for herself aloud. Yes. Maya tucked her legs under her. I had paperwork ready. I thought I'd wait until after the baby. That's what my mother said she would have done. But then she never left. What changed for you? Being seen, Maya said. Not by him, by everyone else. It felt like the universe filed a police report. Lila nodded. Public pain can be clarifying. It can also be a trap. I don't want to live my life in reaction to other people's eyes, Maya said. But I also don't want to pretend. She stopped, pressed her palm to her belly. A small kick answered. She doesn't know what I know. I want to keep it that way. They talked about safety plans, about legal steps Maya could take, about the way charm could be a form of intimidation. They did not talk about love, because love in that room was the least stable variable. Lila gave her a worksheet titled Boundaries Are Architecture and laughed when Maya said, I could have written this, because she practically had. When Maya met Sloane, it was at a cafe that tried to make everything look like it wasn't trying. Sloane arrived in a sweater and jeans, like a disguise that fooled no one. She carried a folder and a posture that wavered. I'm not here to apologize, Sloane said. I mean, I am, but I know that's worthless to you. What do you want? Maya asked. Not to be the villain in a story where none of us are the hero. Sloane placed the folder on the table. Graham Knox likes men like Ethan because they will protect the castle even when the castle is burning. He wanted Ethan distracted. I let myself be the distraction. Because you're cruel? Because my brother owed the wrong debts, Sloane said. Because I'm excellent at rationalizing. Because adults make bad choices and then call them circumstances. She glanced up. I didn't think what he did to you. I didn't think. Maya inhaled. You knew what might happen. Sloane flinched. I knew what could happen. I didn't believe it would. That is not a defense. It is a confession. They sat in the airless pause of women who have been drafted into competing roles by a man who built his life like a press release. Maya didn't forgive Sloane. She accepted the folder. At home, she spread the documents across the table. She saw the outline of a story, inflated valuations greased through by a whisper network, a charity fund used as a sheen for deals that smelled like old fish. Ethan had benefited from sloppiness he didn't orchestrate but hadn't questioned. Lila had a phrase for it, complicit by convenience. Maya called a lawyer who didn't advertise on billboards and asked about restraining orders, custody frameworks, and what to do when the man you married was suddenly a symptom of a larger disease. The lawyer, Aisha Rahman, spoke in paragraphs that made fear sound like a problem set with solutions. That night, she took a photograph of her own front door slightly ajar, light from the hallway slicing the dark. She titled it Exit Wound, and didn't show it to anyone. She printed it and slid it into the back of a drawer like a promise to her future self. Sloane Hart had built a life on the margins, of other people's scandals, other people's money, other people's excuses. She annotated, she edited, she redacted strategically. She told herself she was not the story, but after the gala, she was a character in a narrative she couldn't control. Her brother, Luke, called from a number that shifted locations like a traveling show. They're asking again, he said, voice brittle with the hunger of bet son one. You said you'd help. I did, she said, and looked at the ledger of her choices. I will. She would always, it seemed, be paying bills she hadn't authorized but had somehow signed. Right now, helping meant stopping the biggest leak, so the small ones mattered less. She requested a meeting with Graham Knox in a bar that prided itself on discretion and expensive ice. Graham arrived with an umbrella that cost what some people paid for rent. He smiled the way a man smiles who thinks you owe him your career. You made this complicated, he said. You made this criminal, she replied, tilting the folder just enough for him to see his own signature. I will not be your firewall. Ethan is about to burn, and you are going to stand with him. Graham's smile didn't move, but his eyes did. Careful, he said softly. You move around power long enough, you forget how hot it is. Do you think I haven't been burned? Sloane leaned in. I'm not asking, I'm informing. If you try to make me the patsy, I will trip every alarm. I will deliver these to people who turn rooms into rooms you don't leave for a very long time." They stared each other down until the bartender pretended to polish a glass for the third time. "Fine," Graham said finally, laughter empty as a dead credit card. "We'll let Ethan walk." "He will not walk," Sloane said. "He will crawl, but he won't crawl alone." She left before he could say something that would scar. In the car, she exhaled a breath she didn't know she had rationed. She thought of Maya's eyes, steady, not kind, and felt the first tug of a feeling she had long avoided. Shame. She texted Maya, "If you want me to testify, I will." The reply came 10 minutes later. "Keep the receipts. We'll see." Sloane didn't pray. She made promises to the version of herself she might still become. She paid Luke's debt with money she would later admit was earned dishonestly. Then she called a journalist she trusted just enough to imagine fairness. "There's a story," she said, "but I won't be your source unless you agree to the boring parts too. The systems, the way the charitable giving and the investment pitches braided together." "People like villains," the journalist said. "They like redemption more," Sloane replied, surprising herself with the word in her mouth. "Even if they don't believe in it." She closed her eyes and thought of the gala's violinist recovering mid-phrase. She wondered what it might feel like to start again without cueing the audience first. She opened a new notes file on her phone and labeled it "Margin Notes for Leaving," a list of habits to unlearn, names to unfollow, rooms to avoid. Ethan's phone filled with messages that were really assignments masquerading as advice. "Lay low. Go to Aspen. Donate to something. We can spin this." He deleted them like fruit flies. He checked into a hotel that didn't call itself a hotel, the kind of place that made a point of providing artisanal water and anonymity. He slept badly, woke early, and walked until his feet remembered being useful. On a grey, salt-streaked morning, he ducked into a diner that served coffee without adjectives and sat at the counter next to a man in a city maintenance jacket. "You look like you're thinking too loud," the man said. "What does thinking loud look like?" Ethan asked before he could stop himself. "Like you're in a room with a stereo and forgot the volume knob." The man extended a hand. "Diego, my cousin works nights as a doorman. He says all the people upstairs are the same kind of lonely." Ethan blinked. "My doorman's name is Diego." "Small city," Diego said, grinning. "Don't worry. He doesn't tell me your business. He just says to be kind to the people who forget they can ask for that." They ate in companionable silence. Ethan paid and left too much cash. Outside, he called Dr. Lila Chen and left a message that felt like he'd accidentally opened a window in January. "I need someone who tells the truth," he said, "even when I don't pay them to." Lila saw him that afternoon. He sat on the edge of the couch like a man unaccustomed to furniture that didn't signal status. "I pushed my pregnant wife," he said. "It's the worst thing I've ever done." "It's not the only thing you've done," Lila said, not unkindly. "And you didn't start there. Men don't reach that moment without building a road to it." He nodded, throat tight. "My father taught me that softness is a leak." "And what did you learn about yourself to survive?" "That applause could be a blanket," he said, startled at his own speed. "That being needed is safer than being known." They spoke about accountability, contrition, and how to apologize without asking for absolution. They did not talk about Sloane until Lila asked, "What role does she play when you close your eyes?" "A witness," he said, surprised. "And an audience. And a mirror I didn't have to clean." When he left, he didn't feel better. He felt real. He wrote a statement that night without adjectives and posted it from an account he barely used. He named what he had done and didn't justify it. He called Maya to tell her before he pressed send. She let it go to voicemail. He pressed send anyway. Then he emailed the firm's general counsel with a sentence that would cost him money. "I believe we have exposure on several deals." I have documents. I want to cooperate. Graham's reply arrived in the form of a threat disguised as a kindness. Let's handle this internally. Ethan forwarded it to the SEC tip line. His finger hovered over the trackpad for a long heartbeat before he clicked. He imagined his father's voice. You don't betray family. He imagined his mother's tired eyes and thought, maybe betrayal is telling the truth about who we are. He attached the files Sloane had once CC'd him for visibility, a phrase that now tasted like irony. He called Leonard. I blew the whistle, he said. Leonard exhaled. Good. It'll hurt. Sometimes that's what healing feels like at first. At midnight, Ethan found himself outside the shelter he had once donated to because Sloane said it photographed well. He walked inside and asked the receptionist if they needed volunteers who didn't know what they were doing but could learn. Can you carry boxes and not talk too much? She asked. Yes. Then we'll try you on Tuesday. He walked back to the hotel in a city that could still forgive weather if not men. For the first time in years, he had done something that didn't make him look good. He slept like someone who had earned his exhaustion. Money is loud. Consequences are quieter, slower, more humiliating. Ethan learned the calendar of hearings and interviews. He surrendered his passport. He sat in a room with fluorescent lights and spoke in sentences that did not put him in the center. He lost the apartment in a settlement that felt just but still scraped. He wrote checks with hands that shook. He learned that remorse isn't an event, it's a practice. At the shelter, he unpacked donations. He carried cots up a narrow flight of stairs that put a burn in muscles he had previously hired other men to use. He spent an afternoon assembling cribs with instructions that assumed a level of patience he had never cultivated. A teen mother named Kiana instructed him without bothering to soften her expertise. No, not like that, she said. You're going to strip the screw. Right, he said, smiling despite himself. I'm new at this. We all are, she replied. Until we aren't. She told him about a guidance counselor who kept extra granola bars in a desk drawer and saved her more than once. Diego dropped by with sandwiches and a story about his cousin's nephew. He told Ethan jokes that didn't require context. Ethan learned to be useful without being central. He learned to sweep a floor without narrating it. Maya built a new routine, prenatal classes with Nina, walks around the block when the swelling made her ankles look like someone else's, long sessions of editing her photos until light and shadow told the truth she wanted. She met the lawyer, signed papers that confirmed what she already knew, and filed a petition for a protective order that was more line in the sand than weapon. She took notes on a legal pad in neat block letters. She bought a used rocking chair and sanded it until the wood remembered kindness. Sloane did her own penance in rooms with prosecutors and on calls with journalists who tried to make her sound either monstrous or martyred. She took neither role. I profited from the fog, she said. I'm trying to learn how to see. She stopped ordering black cars for a month and took the train. It didn't make her good. It made her honest about where she stood. When the first long piece ran, detailing the interlaced corruption at Ethan's firm, naming Graham Knox, acknowledging Ethan's cooperation without sanctifying him, Maya read it like a weather report, accurate, impersonal, predicting storms and sun. Strangers online fought in the comments about whether a man could be both abuser and whistleblower, contrite and convenient. Maya turned off her phone and went to sleep with the window cracked to hear the street. Somewhere below, a couple argued in soft Spanish. Somewhere above, a child laughed at something the adult world could not see. A week later, she stood at the edge of a small room in the shelter where Ethan was teaching Kiana how to swaddle with the awkward tenderness of a substitute teacher. He saw her and froze, then moved as if sudden motion would scare her away. I'm not here for you, she said softly, more to herself than to him. I know, he said. Do you need... He stopped, asked instead, how are you? Close, she said, and placed a palm on her belly. She's practicing her exit. He nodded, swallowing something that wanted to be bigger than the room. I'm sorry, he said again, because the apology didn't expire. I heard, she said, about the whistleblowing. It doesn't erase anything. No, she said. It doesn't. She looked at Kiana, asleep on a cot with a paperback open on her chest. But it's a different choice. They stood in the doorway of their old lexicon and didn't go in. Later, Maya ate soup with Nina on the couch and said, "He sounded like a person I used to know." Nina squeezed her hand and offered a peppermint from a glass bowl she kept on the shelf for reasons she couldn't entirely explain. It rained the morning Maya's contractions found a rhythm. Nina timed them like an archivist. "We should go," she said, and called a car after Maya declined an ambulance with a stubborn shake. "I've made enough of a spectacle," Maya said between breaths. "Let's keep this one small." On the way down the stairs, her leg trembled. Nina steadied her without asking permission. Outside, she winced at the sight of a small crowd under a scaffolding awning, keeping dry and curious. A boy in a hoodie held a door with exaggerated politeness. A woman on the phone said, "Hang on, a life is happening." The driver who pulled up was Diego. "Hey neighbor," he said to Nina and to Maya, "I've got you." He adjusted the seat, turned down the radio, and drove like the city was made of eggshells. Traffic did its indifferent dance. In the back seat, Maya closed her eyes and went somewhere private women go when their bodies make rooms for other people. Diego kept his eyes on the road and his mouth closed except to say, "You're doing perfect," like he was talking to his own daughter. At the hospital, the world narrowed to a fluorescent-lit miracle. Nurses moved like rehearsed kindness. Maya labored with a breath that sounded like forgiveness turned inside out. When the doctor said, "One more," Maya gave the last of something and received a cry in return. "Amara," she whispered, the name she and Ethan had argued about and then agreed on separately. The nurse placed the weight of a future on her chest. Maya cried a quiet kind, the kind that doesn't ask to be witnessed. Nina took a photo of fingers curled around a thumb, the only picture from that day that would ever be shared. She didn't call Ethan. Leonard did. So did Diego, unasked. He arrived in a worn jacket that made him look like someone who fixed boilers. He stayed in the waiting room, cap in hands, and did not ask to cross any thresholds that were not his. Hours later, a nurse asked Maya if the father could see the baby. Maya stared at the ceiling's stippled surface, thinking of all the rooms she had documented, the way institutions used texture to make harshness look soft. "He can hold her for 5 minutes," she said. "With you there." Ethan washed his hands like a ritual, masked his face, and stepped into the room that had once been a promise and was now something else. A place where true things were allowed to be small. He looked at Maya, obtained permission without words, and took his daughter into his arms. Amara's face was a map of no one yet, and everyone he loved. He stood very still, so the world would not jolt. Tears came, untheatrical, the kind that made his breathing uneven. He whispered, "Hi. I'm the man who is going to spend the rest of his life learning how to deserve being your father." The nurse pretended to check a monitor so the sacred could have a little privacy. Maya watched. She did not soften. She did not harden further. She placed her palm on the bed rail and found it cool and real. 2 days later, Ethan took the stand in a hearing that would decide bail conditions for Graham Knox. He testified to numbers and conversations, to hints, to the way everyone at the firm understood which questions not to ask. He didn't editorialize. He didn't diminish his own complicity. When Graham's lawyer tried to paint him as a man seeking redemption through performance, Ethan surprised even himself by saying, "Performance used to be my instinct. Today, it is not." Sloane sat in the second row, a scarf hiding half her face, and felt the odd steadiness of watching a man choose a smaller version of himself. She texted Maya a single sentence afterward. "He didn't lie." Maya replied, "I saw." That night, when Ethan returned to his rented one-bedroom with the radiator that clanged like an old song, he found a note under his door. It wasn't from Maya, it was from the shelter director. "Thank you for showing up when there's no camera." He pinned it to the wall with a piece of tape and turned off his phone. He slept, woke when Amara's photo arrived from Nina, and cried again, alone and ordinary. Spring slid in with the stubbornness of a Midwestern apology. Trees budded like careful promises. The city forgave the winter one day at a time. Maya's exhibition, Fault Lines, opened in a gallery that had once been a tailor's. The photographs were domestic and unsentimental: door frames, thresholds, tiny handprints on windows, the impressed oval of a ring in a porcelain bowl. People wondered and tried to name the feelings the images gave them, as if naming were the same as understanding. A critic wrote, "These images refuse spectacle and, in refusing, become the only spectacle worth our time." Ethan arrived late, paid at the door, and stayed at the edge of the room like a man who knew how much space he took. He had a beard now, not out of reinvention, but because shaving felt like a kind of pretending. He watched people step close to a photograph of a window cracked open an inch to let a storm in. Maya saw him the way one sees a former home, recognition without urgency. She walked to him when she wanted to, not sooner. "Congratulations," he said. "Thank you." She tilted her head toward the image of the chipped kitchen paint. "You remember that?" "I sat on that floor once and listened to the refrigerator hum," he said. "It made me feel like I wasn't alone." They stood in something that was not silence, but wasn't conversation either. He cleared his throat. "I'm moving," he said. "A smaller place, near the park. The court says I can have Amara 2 afternoons a week to start. If you ever want more flexibility, I will make myself available. If you want less, I will accept that too." Maya studied his face. The edges had softened in ways the lighting could not fake. "Boundaries aren't punishments," she said. "They're architecture." "I'm learning to love architecture," he replied, and smiled, then let it recede. Sloane didn't come inside. She stood across the street and looked through the glass. She had a ticket tucked into her purse, like an apology she wasn't ready to deliver. She sent a donation to the shelter instead and wrote a note that read, "For the peppermint bowl and the woman who keeps it filled." She walked away without checking whether anyone saw her. Leonard visited the exhibit and put a hand on Ethan's shoulder cautiously, as if he were approaching a startling horse. "You look like yourself," he said. "Maybe for the first time," Ethan replied. Months layered. Ethan kept volunteering, and then, when the case settled into the kind of bureaucratic march that devours headlines, he used what money he had left to start a small fund with a narrow mission: backing ventures run by women leaving abusive relationships that needed bridge financing, literal, not metaphorical, to cross into a different life. He kept the fund quiet. He named it Threshold Capital and didn't put his name on the website. He hired Aisha Rahman as counsel and Kiana, now a part-time community college student, as a paid intern. Maya's photos traveled to 2 other cities. She brought Amara to a park where Ethan waited on a bench with a diaper bag he had packed himself, each item labeled in his librarian's handwriting. He watched Maya walk away and didn't check his phone. He and Amara watched pigeons make complicated decisions about which steps to take next. He learned the names of playground mothers and the rules of the sandbox. He learned to sit in a day without asking it for applause. One evening, Diego invited them to his nephew's birthday in a park shelter with aluminum tables. There were empanadas and a cake with frosting that stained everyone's mouths blue. Nina laughed with Sloane, who had appeared like she belonged. Leonard brought Tupperware because he'd learned, late, how to leave a party without leaving a mess. They were all there, in varying proximities and permissions, and the sky held. At the end of the party, Ethan returned Maya's keys to the stroller with a small, practical note. "I refilled the wipes." She nodded. They didn't rehearse the future. They entered it. In his apartment that night, Ethan took off the last watch he had bought to impress a room that would never love him and placed it in a drawer. He sat by the window and listened to the radiator's music. He thought of a door half open, of a woman who made photographs that refused to flatter, of a daughter who would grow up in a city that taught second chances to people who did the work. He didn't call anyone. He let the quiet be a kind of applause he hadn't learned yet, but was willing to practice. If this story stayed with you, if you recognize the fault lines, the soft apologies, or the quiet work of repair, help it find more hearts. Like this video so the algorithm doesn't keep the hard parts hidden. Share it with someone who's standing at a threshold and needs a nudge toward the light. And if you want more cinematic, true-to-life fiction about messy choices, power, and the slow, stubborn business of redemption, subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next chapter. Your support lets us make longer, deeper stories that respect your attention. In the comments, tell us which moment hit you hardest. The gala's hush, the peppermint bowl at the shelter, Sloane's confession, or the first time Ethan held Amara. We read everything. Tell us too what redemption looks like where you live. Thanks for watching. Thanks for feeling this with us. And until next time, be gentle with yourself and fierce with your boundaries.